Greetings from STO Better Tactical. Today's Elite TFO is best served cold. Let's review the objectives.
The first objective of this TFO is to defeat a Klingon fleet. Once the fleet is destroyed, secure control stations Alpha, Beta, and Gamma by flying in close proximity to them and defeating House Mokai infiltrators that arrive periodically. Maintaining Allied presence near a control station will cause its defense satellites to flip to your side. Control stations left exposed to House Mokai ships for too long will turn their defense satellites on player ships. The stations must be defended for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Following this, prisoners will attempt to escape from the nearby prison world below. Stop escaping transports by damaging them to low health and then securing them through the standard interact, starting from at least 7 kilometers to initiate the capture of a disabled transport. There is no leash distance once a capture has begun. Accidentally killing disabled transports is extremely unlikely, and they regenerate 50% health upon being disabled. No transport may escape, or the TFO will fail. Once captured, transports will head into orbit and must be escorted to safety. Maintain control over the stations during this time to prevent defense satellites or House Mokai vessels from destroying the transports. This phase takes at least 6 minutes. Once all 20 transports are disabled, captured, and escorted safely to the warp-out point, the final stage of the operation will begin. 100 dilithium haulers will emerge and attempt to reach the control stations to destroy them by self-destructing. Your objective is to destroy the haulers while keeping the stations intact. Should a station be destroyed, the mission will fail. Once your team has destroyed 100 haulers with all control stations surviving, the mission completes.
Thank you. On to risks and rewards. This map needs substantial coordination to play on Elite, and the threat level is high due to warp core breaches from dilithium haulers and the threat from the Navarre warships. This map has a time floor of at least 8.5 minutes and will likely end up being closer to 15 minutes when the other parts of the TFO are considered. It is currently bugged and rewards a large amount of any choice of marks, as well as the potential for an isomagnetic plasma piece, so the rewards are definitely worth the time and effort needed to run it successfully. The enemies on this operation are House Mokai Klingon vessels. Most of their ships are relatively weak and don't inflict significant damage, so opposition is generally light. However, there are 2 threats to consider. First, the largest House Mokai vessels you will face are Navarre-class warships, which have an ability called isometric charge that can one-shot less survivable player ships depending on how it bounces. Second, dilithium haulers have a larger warp core breach radius, 3 kilometers compared to the standard 2 kilometers. This breach effect cannot be negated by typical nullifying effects like the dark matter quantum torpedo launcher or digitizer beams. Tactics. Most of the TFO should divide a team of up to 5 players across the 3 defense stations. The strength of each player should be considered, but assigning 1 player each to Alpha and Beta station and at least 2 to Gamma station is advisable if there are 2 players that can each solo a station. The last player can either roam or help cover Gamma. Having 2 players at Gamma will allow 2 players to engage the transports in the next stage. Those 2 players should focus on disabling first, then capturing the transports. Disabled transports will go nowhere and aren't a major threat, whereas a transport escaping will result in mission failure on Elite. That said, the mission will not advance until all captured transports evacuate, so care should be taken to prioritize securing transports. The final player can remain at Gamma to help keep it from reverting to House Mokai allegiance, or roam as needed. In the final stage, keeping players close to the stations is important, as losing a single starbase will cause the mission to fail on Elite. Players can roam as dilithium haulers are cleared out, but mind the blast radius and prioritize keeping control stations clear of haulers. Now, combat footage will be shown to illustrate the principles discussed previously. The goal of this section is not to illustrate perfect piloting, but provide an example of how to successfully complete the map with all objectives and without dying. Note that for brevity's sake, the footage is usually sped up relative to in-game speed. FAW builds excel on this map, as House Mokai ships are fairly numerous and flimsy, which makes them great targets for AoE firing modes. Engage the initial fleet, then move to a control station of your choice. I chose Gamma in order to be in position for the transports in the next stage. Stay close to the control station and destroy Mokai infiltrators as they appear. You can generally position over the station on a fire at will build. The only reason to move would be to bring your torpedo to bear to maintain a firing mode cycle using entwined tactical matrices. This part is fairly straightforward, as all that needs to happen is maintaining position and defeating the infiltrators. Remember that keeping 2 players at Control Station Gamma will allow at least 1, if not 2 players, to fly toward the planet to secure transports in the next stage. Since this section is time-gated and the enemies are relatively weak, this is a good time to coordinate with your team on who is doing what in the next stage if you haven't done so already. Stationing 3 players around the control stations, 1 player at each one, to keep them secured is advisable, which leaves 2 players to disable and recapture the transports. However, if your team has players who can't easily defeat the Mokai infiltrators and their attendant ships, you may consider assigning at least one of them to the transports just on recapture duty. This higher level of coordination needed makes this TFO more challenging, and in pre-made groups we usually assign roles at the start of the TFO or in the initial stage rather than waiting until right when the transports spawn. Adding time pressure does nobody any favors. This map has 2 long briefings, and while the voiceover is enjoyable for immersion, we're going to skip them for the purposes of this tutorial. As the transport stage begins, they will arrive in the following numbers: 1, then another 1, then 2 at once, then 3, then 5, then 8. Having 2 players disabling and capturing transports in the final stages will speed that part of the mission along appreciably and ensure that no transports escape. Remember to prioritize disabling transports over capturing them, though both objectives can generally be done at the same time. Your build should be able to damage multiple transports at a time, as they are not especially sturdy. Transports that are yet to be disabled are marked in red, while transports that have been disabled but not recaptured have a blue exclamation point over them. Transports that are secured and are headed for the warp out point have a blue shield. The map will fail on Elite if a transport escapes, and won't progress to the next stage until all transports are recaptured. Once all the transports are secured, then return to Gamma or roam as needed to maintain the control stations. The defense satellites are not much of a threat to players, but will do significant damage to the slow-moving transports. Lastly, in this stage as well as the next one, watch out for isometric charge from the Navarre warships. If it bounces correctly, it could easily destroy a squishy player ship from full health.
Transports are making a break for it. Do not let them get away.
The House Mokai ships around the transports are generally not much of a threat to the recaptured transports or to player ships. Aside from the Navarre warships, you can clean them up at your convenience, but keep your focus on securing transports. This is not a DPS benchmark map, and killing everything without focusing on securing transports in this stage will only prolong the TFO. If I was at Alpha or Beta Station in the previous stage instead of Gamma, I would have remained there doing the same task, maintaining position and taking down House Mokai ships in the vicinity. For the purposes of this tutorial, I chose Gamma to illustrate transport, capture, and disable. If you're at Alpha or Beta, simply do as what you did in the previous section and defend your station. In this case, because we were a 4-man group performing this TFO, I was the only player available to capture transports, which made this stage take appreciably longer. In a full 5-man group, your second player should definitely be assigned to transport duty. In this next stage, engage the 100 dilithium haulers before they can destroy the control stations. The haulers go down quickly to fire at will, but mind the 3-kilometer blast radius from ships on your flanks. There is no need to close with the haulers to close range for optimal DPS. They are flimsy and numerous. Groups of haulers periodically spawn from the nearby space platforms, so focus your attention there until the haulers are thinned out. Use your speed boosts like evasive maneuvers to approach groups of transports closing in on the control stations. Losing a station is a painful way to fail the mission in its final stage. Once the haulers are mostly destroyed, move to the edges of the triangle formed by the control stations and finish off the last few. With that, the mission is successful and you can claim your substantial rewards. Captain, if this breakdown helped you in your quest to play STO better, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. The link to the specific build used for this tutorial is in the description. For more guides and builds, check us out at www.stobetter.com.